Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just make sure we're like okay. YouTube is going. Hold on one second. All right, we're on LinkedIn Live, so that's all that matters. Got the technical details out of the way. Hey, good afternoon. Happy early Friday, everybody. We are an hour early, so hopefully we do get all our normal participants. I'm Tim from Team Tim, here with the other Tim from Team Tim. Yes, look, we have shirts, although he isn't wearing the proper brand, but it's all good.
I just went digging into my laundry, hoping I could pull it out, but it's still.
You didn't wash that thing from IT Nation already?
I did. I just, I think it's probably in my daughter's closet or something.
Oh yeah, the kids are probably wearing it, right? So yeah, a little early edition here of Team Tim. We're waiting for our one other person, special guest, maybe surprise guest. No, it's not a special guest, but Wes Spencer should be joining us here shortly. But in the meantime, we have 2/3 of Empath here with us. And why don't we take a second or so and let y'all introduce yourself? And looks like, I don't know, Kyle, you're up first.
All right. Kyle Christensen, Empath. How you guys doing? I don't really know what more it is to say, but other than excited to be here and chat about whatever I can fill the air with.
I see you came well prepared because, we did such a great job giving you all the questions in advance this time. Probably not as well prepared as we were at IT Nation, but yeah, we're glad to have you, Kyle. Thank you so much. And of course, always the Alex Farling, my friend. How are you?
Hanging out live from the airport, so I'll do the best I can to manage my mute button so you guys don't have to jam out to all the crazy background noise here. But yeah, Alex Farling, Empath, happy to be here.
Oh, thanks for being here. We were just talking just before in the green room, like that. Those earbuds are amazing. Like the noise canceling is working really, really well.
The combination of aftershocks and a checkbox here in the old StreamYard.
Nice. Well, so yesterday afternoon, I had my earbuds, blah 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 blah. I did my thing, and then this morning, I can't find my earbuds. Oh, last night I'm like, I can't find my earbuds. I can't. Maureen and I searched the house, couldn't find them, and I was like, all right, I'll just go buy a new pair. So I did. They'll arrive here from Amazon in like any minute. Maureen got in my car this morning and was like, here's your earbuds. So, yeah. Anyways, isn't that always the way you lose your thing? And when both you and the wife who can find anything can't find them? Oh, look, and guess who's here? So, Wes.
Hey.
Hey, Wes, how are you? So we'll since you're just here, we'll put you up on screen first and allow you to be the next third of Empath and say hello. How are you? Welcome.
Yeah. Hey guys, Wes Spencer here, co-founder of Empath. Great to be with you guys. And I think it's my second time on Team Tim, so this is super cool.
Nice. Glad to have you here. And as always, Jesse, say hello, my friend.
Hey everyone, Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting. We help MSPs scale security operations. I'm excited to be here and talk about getting a seat at your customer's table. Probably going to be the easiest day for us in a while, guys, because we have 3 gentlemen who can basically run the show for us. So I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation. Appreciate the introduction.
Awesome. And then obviously, awesome. Jim himself.
Yeah, so really excited about this. Wes, he mentioned this is the second time he's been on. The first time, one of my favorite episodes, really, it's taking a step back, digging into kind of the personal relationship and how you can have better conversations, right, with the client. So I just love that. I've cut it up. I've listened to it a couple times. So just really building on that. And now he's got 2 amazing co-founders that are joining us here as well. So how do you want to kick it off, Tim?
So I'm thinking that, everybody knows sort of all of us here in the space, but let me do this, right? So let me put the people with the people. Hey, I'm very excited that we have 6 because, my OCD kicks in and I'm like 5 doesn't, 3 doesn't. Yeah. So I'm glad that I have the Hollywood squares finally going on. So Wes, as the initial person of Empath and then bringing Alex and Kyle in, share a few seconds about your vision and then where Alex and then Kyle kind of fits in there.
Yeah, sure. So the beginnings were kind of fun. You just never know how you start a company and sometimes how things come out, right? Like it's fun reading about these. Like take Slack. Most people don't know Slack used to be a gaming company before they became a messaging platform, right? So sometimes you make pivots and sometimes you think you're going to do thing A and then it becomes thing B or C. And when I first started Empath, it was, I had left ConnectWise and was trying to think through like, what do I really want to do? And I knew one of the things I was good at that I enjoyed is just helping MSPs grow in cybersecurity. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. And so I started Empath Cyber as a way to start doing exactly that, helping MSPs in their journey, give them what they need to know. And then I ran across this guy named Alex Farling, who happens to be one of the most grumpy people in the channel. And I was like, Alex, can I show you what I'm building? I have an idea for something. And I showed it to Alex and he didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He didn't pat me on the back. He didn't say, "Oh, Wes, what a great idea, you young entrepreneur, you." He actually had something very negative to say, which was accurate. Alex, you want to say what that was? His Wi-Fi may
I was
not
already
be
told
cooperating.
today I got too many F-bombs, so I will leave that part out. But said nobody needs another portal to log into.
Yeah,
And there may have been an expletive in there somewhere.
There was.
I stand by that statement. I stand by that statement, even though we're building a portal. So
Yeah, there was a guy that said that, and there was an F-bomb, and it was you, Alex. And it made me kind of pull back and think, well, maybe this is a big mistake. He's right. People don't need another portal. There's a ton of these. But I'm like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, we got to get this going. And so, I went head first anyway. And eventually, Alex kind of not only came around, but convinced me how wrong I was. Not in Empath, but he said, Wes, you're thinking too small. He said, let me introduce you to this guy named Kyle. Let me talk a little bit about like what I think we're really missing. And it's not just cyber education. It's all things MSP. We all need to be rowing the same direction. So I meet this guy named Kyle and I'm blown away by Kyle's background and what he's done and how he's a turnaround guy and how he's a true ops professional. And he's against the zeitgeist of like, here's the way you have to do running an MSP. You must follow my method. So anyway, long story short, we come around and I realized I am thinking too small. There's something much bigger. And so we decided to just redo this thing and take it from a small lifestyle brand into something real and create a real education platform and community and help MSPs row in the same direction, regardless of what role type you're in your organization. And so that's a high level of what Empath is and kind of how it came about.
I love that. And, I heard last night on your RejectionCon, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and conversation with MSP Geek, like, should we just start calling you Professor Spencer, or is it still Dictator?
Dictator it sounds like it carries a lot more weight. Maybe that's not true, but I feel like people don't listen to a professor. They have a little fear of being tipped out of the helicopter of a dictator, right?
Yeah, that's true. But then again, I always go back when I hear Professor to my Gilligan Islands days, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the Professor and Marianne, like, woohoo! But no, Wes, we're really excited to learn more about what you're doing there at Empath. I think we all agree that, helping MSPs level up, shift left, get them trained up, like that is really what we're doing here at Team Tim as well. So I love the fact that we can bring like-minded individuals like you and Alex and Kyle into the fold and onto our meetings here, because that's really it, right? There's a lot of voices in the channel, and I tend to see a lot of the same people wanting to help educate over and over. And I'm really glad that, somebody's actually taking that initiative with, oh yeah, we lost Wes, he'll come back. Someone's actually taken that initiative with, Wes, Kyle, Alex, and Empath as a whole. So, hey, whoa, there he is.
Tim,
For a second.
I'd love to kind of kick this off.
Yeah.
I think you had a hallway conversation with Wes at one point, and really just the theme today, like earning a seat at the client's table. And then we had a similar conversation on Sunday afternoon on another Patriots loss or something. And we got into this, right? Like talking about
Sports ball.
Yeah. Talking about, you took Tom Brady from us, Wes. What the heck? But, we talk about services and we talk about structure, but we never kind of get to like the root of the problem, right? Like, how do you get in that engaging conversation and become that trusted advisor unicorn? Like, we don't want to really kind of overdo that, but you just made some good points, Tim, about, how you've got to ask the questions and you just got to listen. You got to figure out what the business does. You got to data diagram the business. Like, all those things, I think, a lot of the things you do in your peer group, right? To understand what the business does and get in line with the business owner. So am I remembering that right, Sam? Or?
Yeah, well, I always love the good football analogy, and that's okay. Wes and Alex, I understand that. They stole our Tom Brady. It's fine. It's good. We would still suck even if it wasn't with Tom Brady. So, but yeah, the conversation around like, what is it? Is it ops? Is it process? Is it we just don't know what we're doing, right? Do we not have the right players at the on the bench or in the game? Right. And I think it's really important to be able to like those experts, like the three we have here, being able to share that knowledge in a methodical way. Right. Because, I do stuff every week with our peer group, whatever. But having that process, and I hate to use the word LMS because I know that isn't exactly the portal that you're building, but you're building a portal that's like an LMS. I don't know.
It'll have an LMS in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but, there's more to it than just here's a video, watch a thing, right? And I think that's going to be really helpful in the space.
It will. We talked about this. The IT Nation talk that we did was a lot of fun because it forced us into thinking through like what exactly, how do we sort of express what it is that we're doing? And a couple things that I want to just share that I think are relevant regardless of, Empath. One of those is the data really does show it's so important to understand from your perspective when MSPs hire people, they are not hiring from Huntress. They're not hiring from CrowdStrike. They're not hiring from Cisco. They're not hiring from Microsoft. They're hiring from the AT&T store. They're hiring from Publix, which is like our local grocery chain. They're hiring from, I just talked to an MSP the other day that was in the CyberFox office, and he had a new employee, and she's amazing. She's running a lot of customer success stuff for them. She came out of automotive. So she was like, worked for a car dealer. And his point was anyone that can make someone happy after the buying experience of a vehicle is someone I want to hire. Right. Which is true. But that poor lady has no experience at an MSP, very little with technology. I don't think that's a negative. I actually think that is an exploit waiting to happen for MSPs. The key is how do we get them moving in the same speed? How do we get them up and going? And we're seeing this more and more. You talk to the large PE funded MSPs. One of the priority ones for them in 2024 is how do we revolutionize onboarding? And I don't mean technical onboarding. I mean educational onboarding and getting a consistency of service delivery. Yeah. Give an example of this. A friend of ours, his name's Keith, is in Empath, and he used to run customer success, like onboarding and education for all of Panera Bread. All right, so think about this for a minute. And he said we had 100,000 employees at Panera Bread. The average tenure is 6 months. So he goes, no wonder when you walk into Panera A, all of a sudden service delivery is amazing. You go into Panera B and it's the worst thing ever. And the food is burned and everything's slow and no one has you have a bad experience. He goes, we do everything hip to hip at Panera. And we've radically changed that to succeed. When you have, so my point is MSPs are no different. Panera has that problem. MSPs have that problem. And so that's what we're about solving is helping us get consistency and accountability in our growth across the board.
So, yeah, I was going to say, you make a really interesting distinction, and that is the accountability piece, right? I mean, you can go to Udemy, you can go to LinkedIn Learning, you can go to all over the place and take whatever kind of good, better, best courses. But what I like is the accountability piece that you're bringing. And you know what? I'm actually going to pull up our good friend Kyle here to talk about his accountability. Right, because Kyle is Mr. Accountability, right?
There it
is. At some point, I'm afraid that I'm going to become like the Gallagher of the MSP space. And people are going to be like, "Can you break a watermelon open?"
Or
he had better hair.
You want to go back a few years? Hacksaw with the 2x4.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what Wes was saying, and it's funny, Alex and I actually had a conversation with Ninja's community, Ninja RMM's community, about QBR getting a seat at the table, all of this. And I've heard so many times this year, recruitment's hard, hiring's difficult, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of it is, I want the easy button. At the core of it, it's thinking I've hit a point of scale and I'd rather not go through the effort of trying to build out a training program because it's too hard or outside of my wheelhouse. I'd rather either A, pay a recruiter way too much money to find someone that I can't afford, right? Some unobtainium, or two, pay them way too much money and I'll never have an ROI on this employee. However, it's also breeding a culture in our channel to where people are just going to leave the channel because enterprise is going to gobble them up because they have a way higher budget for us.
Yep.
So what we have to build for MSPs to succeed, and I'm not saying we as in like Empath, as a community, we need to build this. How can we standardize some of these skill sets that we need to grow these small businesses to help the small businesses in general, right? We are a huge pulse on small business and in any country, right? And that kind of goes into, I think, the whole topic of getting a seat at the table is if we're not having the right conversations, if we're not receiving the right feedback, they're never going to want us to be part of the conversation in the first place.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it reminded me, Tim, hearing what Kyle was just saying, you know, what you talk about is how working in the Big Four environment, the great consultants ask good questions, right? And so I think that's building kind of that consulting mentality and that trusted advisor consultant role is a real skill that we need to build out as a community. And I don't think we've done that very well. So I guess that's where I wanted to hear from the Empath team is, are you seeing anyone doing that? Or what are some ideas or some pragmatic advice that you can give to people to start taking directed steps toward building a consultant style approach for their VCIOs, for their VCSOs, and even for their engineers?
Well, I think part of that goes to process in the organization, right? You have to build out the, Tim is probably working under the Cavello way, right? There's a way that each company does what they do, right? And Jesse has the Power PSA way, right?
Right.
And so whoever your company is, at my MSP, we had the Delaware Micro way, and everybody behaved the same because we had an expectation that when you came on board with our company, you were going to get XYZ experience. I can't do that if I don't train.
Right.
There's no way that I can deliver a consistent experience. And then if I have to hand off a role to someone, if I have to hand off a client to someone, they need to feel like, oh, that conversation kind of carried over and happened in the same way as it did when Alex was here, as when Kyle comes walking in or whatever. But the other place I think we fail is that how much training is there in the channel beyond just some videos and some vendor portals?
Right.
And one of the things we're trying to step out of, and you heard Kyle and Wes say it, our goal is to be more than an LMS. And one of the comments that one of our customers posted in the general chat this morning was just, I guess it was last night, just super insightful to me. He said they just finished an offsite with about 60 of their people, and they brought 60 people out. They had Matt Lee and Ethan Tancredi from Huntress sit down and go over with them and basically do an exercise. And Matt fondly calls it the "Are you ready for the worst day of your life" exercise. But they basically role play the 15 days after an RMM breach, what that would be like for your MSP.
Yeah.
And they took it to the level where they went in and renamed all the parts of the exercise after their own customers and kind of walked through this. So it was the most eye-opening thing they've ever done. And in my mind, letting 60 people see access to this and understand what that feels like, this gives your people a way different view of your business than they had the day before they walked into this room. They understand how hard it's going to be. They understand why a culture of security is important because they know what 15 days of hell is going to look like. And I think all too often we go watch a video. Okay, you learned something, go back to work. And the thing that we have to solve for at Empath is how do you get those discussions together? How do you bring smart people together and whiteboard something or run an exercise? And Wes is just a master at doing these in a live stream, and we've done quite a few of them. But being able to just pull people together and say, let's think through an exercise instead of just read and regurgitate.
Right.
There's a difference between training and education. And I think education happens when you have to take what you were trained on and implement it or talk it out or, actually work through the problem. And I think that's the thing that part of what we're trying to solve is the difference between training and education.
I think those whiteboarding exercises are amazing, Alex. Like when you start thinking analytically and you feel like you're actually contributing to something and everyone kind of around the whiteboard is like, oh, that's a good idea, or that's a good point, or like you start to share those things. But I think you have to get to that point as well where they feel invited or they feel okay, or right. It's like hard to build that culture where they're like, oh, we want your contribution. Like we hired you for a reason. We know you're good at this. Like, come on, pitch in, like be a part of it. Right. So
Well, yeah, and every idea is not a good idea, so they have to be comfortable to say something stupid every
Yeah.
now and again, right? And we all have to ask the stupid question. That's how we get smarter.
And so I just got to say, both Alex and I are pretty bummed that we heard that Jamboard is now going away, because I know Alex used it a lot. I started using it a lot after I, picked some things up from Alex, and I'm like, I gotta find another tool. But we've
There's
done
a lot of whiteboards out there. Yeah,
there are. But I was a little bummed, like, no more Jamboard. Damn it.
we did tons of those with our lifecycle partners, and just to help them think through an exercise, right? And it doesn't have to be pretty, and that's just proof it didn't have to be fancy, because that's a super crappy tool, but it happened to be baked into G Suite that we used at the software company, and it was just there, and it was easy, and we would throw things out on a board, drag them around, let people contribute. And when you let everybody contribute, you wind up with the sum of the parts is greater than the smartest person at the table, and I think that's the important thing. And the guy who did this might be the smartest person at the table in most of the rooms he goes into, but to hear him, just impressed by how much his team got out of it and how much they were able to put back into it, coming from somebody like that was impressive enough to me.
And I think there's a couple of things too with this, as going into a seat at the table communication, how people hear. Is there's two big variables when you're communicating with somebody that you have to keep in mind, and probably why you're not getting a seat at the table. So the first is people learn in three different ways: kinesthetic, auditory, or visual. They got to see it, be able to touch it, or they got to be able to hear it. You can't project on how I learned something to somebody else. You need to either, one, know how they like to learn and how they like to participate, or two, you need to fulfill all three of those. And this is where whiteboarding becomes such a critical exercise, because one thing I learned from I think they were like a high level professor educator, is that what's interesting about whiteboarding is, while it's not kinesthetic directly, a kinesthetic learner watching someone be kinesthetic will actually check that box. So that's where whiteboarding is such a critical task, and why chalkboards have been around now for 150 years. And then the second is, you have two different response mechanisms for people when they analyze data. You're either going to have the person that's quickly able to react and give you an answer, or you're going to have somebody that's going to need to analyze and get you an answer at a different time. Now, if you put someone into a corner to give their feedback right away, then they are either going to, one, give you wrong feedback, or two, they're just not going to want to give you feedback at all. So you have to let it breathe. So if you can control those two variables when you're interacting with somebody, they will feel appreciated, because you are respecting how they operate within either decision or conversation.
Yeah, and really, done that earlier, but I hit the bar now so that your forehead wasn't cut off. I was just over here trying to figure out, how do I get rid of that so I'm not cutting everybody up?
Telling us for weeks, yeah.
Well, I think that was so spot on, and it really boils down to, how do we get a seat at the table? Is how do we begin that? It's trust. And if you can communicate with someone and they feel listened to and they feel heard, you're building a bond of trust there. And of course, there's more to it than that. It's not less than that, but it's definitely more than that. Or it's not more than that, but it's definitely not less than that either. So.
Well, but if we work with our people and really empower them to learn and understand, they're going to have better conversations with our customers,
right?
Which earns you the trust to have that better seat at the table. So what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, it's like Thanksgiving, right? When I go and I sit to eat, I got a turkey smoking right out there too, so it's in my brain, because today is Friendsgiving, which some might argue is better than Thanksgiving, right?
I'll be right over.
But it's like, when you think about this, who do you want at the table? I want at the table people that I can have a great conversation with, that I can converse with, that understand me. I throw to the kids' table, the kids, because all they want to do is talk about Roblox. All they want to do is talk about stuff that doesn't affect me. All they want to do is talk about stuff that's like, I just don't care about, right? So we have the kids' table for the kids and the people that act like kids, Alex. The rest of us, we're like, I want you to be with us so we can talk and have a great conversation, and it hones us and sharpens us, right? And so it's the same thing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the business owner is saying, why should I let you come sit over here where the big boys are and the big gals are? Why should I do that? Why should I bring you in? Are you going to add to this conversation? Are you going to speak my language? Are you going to talk about the things I care about? Are you going to, or are you at the kids' table? You're talking about, cybersecurity and Roblox. And that's something we have to come to grips with.
Well, and we have to come to terms with the fact that too often we've come to the table and screwed it up.
Yeah.
Right? We show up at the table and go, look at the widgets and gadgets. Look at how many times I backed up your backups. Will you spend $2 extra on a widget? And we're having this transactional conversation with a customer that we're supposed to be building a relationship with.
Yeah. One of the go
I
ahead,
don't think
Jesse.
to be entitled, right? Like with that, and it's like you can't. This is my customer, and they're my customer, and they'll listen to me, right? You've always got to be. It's like social media, like it can go away in an instant. Their attention, their engagement, right? Like so, you're, as you said, like what are you bringing in terms of insights? Like we kind of talked about this a little bit at IT Nation last week. Like, what are the like engaging conversations where they're like, oh, I'm going to jump out of my seat because I really care about that, and like that's really cool. Which is like. It's like when Wes
what can you do to get them to put this stupid thing down, right?
Yeah.
What can you do to get them to put this thing down and stop scrolling their alerts that they're participating in a conversation with you?
Absolutely.
Because that's your
see that all the time in meetings for the last 10 years, right? Alex, like they're just like, keep going. You're like, and Wes tonight, like we'll have I assume there'll be some alcohol and some turkey served, and like people almost raise their voice. They get so excited. Right.
Yeah.
Like when you're like, oh yeah, did you hear about that? And you heard about it, it's like, it's that same kind of engagement, I think, where they're like, I'm excited to talk about like, what are my people doing 80% of the day? Or like, where can I save money by like, hardware rationalization, software rationalization, whatever. Right. But like you're bringing those questions where it doesn't sound as nerdy as I just said it, like hardware in software rationalization. It says like
one of the exercises that we did with our MSP was we walked through a revenue life cycle, like what makes them money, right? And asking, and I'll throw it out there. We have the questionnaires on our website. The 14 questions that are pointed enough to be able to ask that customer, what makes you money? What keeps that money going? How do we make that wheel rounder and faster and more efficient? Like. We said this at our panel talk, risk, revenue, and reputation, the 3 R's. And as Jesse would say, the fourth R, regerts, right? Regerts, right? But having that revenue conversation then can lead to the risk conversation and all the other reputational conversations, right? It doesn't have to be hard. Now, the hard part, and this is where I think Empath is really going to be able to knock it out of the park, is I don't know how to talk revenue. I can talk tickets. I can talk, mean time to resolution. I can talk, spam's filtered. How do I have that revenue conversation? I don't even know how to walk. Like, I don't even do it with myself, right? And I think that's where Empath's really going to be able to help figure that piece out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about the Thanksgiving conversation. It's like the adults are talking and a kid comes up to the table, like, look what I can do. Look what I can do. Remember that old show?
Yeah.
And they're like, get out of here, kid. We're talking about important stuff, right? So
that sounds like an MSP to me. I need $2 more. I need $2 more. I need $2 more, right?
Yeah.
But Tim, you mentioned a download you guys have on your website with 14 or 15 questions. I would ask, how many folks actually go walk through those questions with your own team, just internally, like role play through it, as there's a screaming baby in the background, role play through it so that when you get to your customer, you don't sound like you're reading from a checklist of questions you have to collect information from, because they don't want to interact in that. That's not the fun conversation that Tim and Jesse were talking about that gets them engaged. So you have to figure out how to get the information that those 15 questions are asking in a way that sounds informational, so that they can be talking about their business instead of answering your questions, right? You're engaging in them to brag about their business, because Kyle can probably tell us all about the psyche of a business owner. They're proud people. I'm going to try and avoid using the word ego, but they like to talk about their business. They like to talk about their accomplishments and their achievements. They'd love to tell you how money flows through their business, and maybe even how much of it, if you'll shut up long enough to listen.
Right.
It's their baby for sure.
What's funny is we've been going around this horn. The one thing that kept popping up in my head is we talk too damn much. So often in conversations, we do not just shut up and use the most powerful tool we have when it comes to building a relationship. Right. And I think, Tim, I've told you this countless times. I used to make my team, and I would even do it to myself. I would write weight on every piece of paper I would look at. Why am I talking? Yes, exactly.
Stop. Listen.
Because your customer does not need to know how smart you are. right? We have so many insecurities in conversation when either one, nothing is being said, or two, you're nervous and insecure, that you talk a lot because you want to show value in your intelligence to prove the worth of your services or what you're about to ask them for. However, if you reverse that, right, go back to my second thing about dynamics in education or learning, is they may be analytical. If you don't shut up, they will not respond. And I can tell you right now, the one thing that they want is to talk and tell you about their problems in their business, because that is what the entrepreneur is obsessed about. And if you do not give them that space, they are not going to give you that time.
Exactly. And you know, for me personally, this is, you guys know this about myself. Like, I'm a verbal processor and my wife is an internal processor. So this doesn't work. But after 20, almost a little over 20 years, we figured out how to make it work. So it's the same thing when I approach any prospects, any clients, whatever. I need to shut up because I'm still, garbage dumping, and they need to internally process what I just dumped on them. And so it's really been interesting for me over the last 20 years to have that dynamic with my wife where I'm like, spew, and she's like,
yeah,
awkward silence. And I'm like, even that 5 seconds of awkward silence drives me nuts.
It's almost like AI is coming along and we're going to record like the last 20 minutes with the client and it's be like, well, you talked 18 minutes and they talked 2 minutes. And the expression on their face showed that they just didn't give a right? Like, so we talked about this with Marnie, and she, just that time of possession, like who's talking, who's not talking, waiting, listening. I had a great boss I worked for a couple years ago, and he's like, the greatest asset we have as a firm is the client's problems. And if you don't shut up and ask the question, you're never going to know what the client problem is. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Well, and body language plays into that too, right? You watch the people who sit back at the table like this. So now I know I just lost you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if we're too busy running our mouth, we'll never see or hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and sometimes we miss those cues just because I think it tends to be those of us that are just far more technically driven and more deeply introverted. We miss those cues, and I think they can be trained. They have to be taught. And I also think, or not think, I know there's a few platforms that have come out now that do some of that like sentiment analysis, and they show you who's talking the most and all that kind of stuff in Zoom calls. And I would encourage those of you that need some practice on that to leverage those tools and to lean on them to just sort of see what's the output and outcomes from actually doing some of that.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're managing people, right, what does that give you visibility into the guy who's not closing, right? Or the guy who's not getting good relationships, the guy who's struggling. But it also comes down to knowing what questions to ask. There's a person in this channel who every now and again asks me a question that just annoys the hell out of me when she does it. But I know it's the best question you can ask, which is, how does that make you feel? Right? There's money running through your business. How does that go? Okay, well, if this system went down in the middle of the day, how would that make you feel? What would that do to your life? Right? Or they start to tell you a little bit about their business and you feel like you need more information. How does that make you feel? Is there what would you feel like if? And when you start to get the feels in there, holy crap, you can learn a lot about what's going on with somebody.
I think that's right. And as you all were talking about this, I was thinking, so many, MSPs that I've worked in and MSPs that I've worked with, and back to what Kyle said, is there's not like a dedicated focus on upscaling and training our people who are having these conversations, right? So we just talked about all these things that, could be pie in the sky, for lack of a better word, if you don't operationalize them. So it's something you could start small and take some of these things and doing tabletops, doing whiteboarding, set up a QBR series for the next year where you talk to your customers and say, we're going to talk about these 4 things, one in each QBR. We want to get to know your business better. And then, you can trial little things, try this out, but then debrief with the rest of your team. What worked, what didn't, what did they respond to, what didn't. Everyone has that whiteboard, that shared tabletop experience. And I think, but you have to codify that, right? There has to be a directed and intentional method for all of this.
Well, I would argue be your own customer, right? Take the first QBR yourself and let someone else on your team present it to you so you hear what it feels like to get the advice that you're giving to your customers. I used to hate it when it happened in my office because they'd come to me and go, hey, this laptop's 48 months old. when are we going to get this person a new laptop? And I'd go, well, we spend way more money on our equipment than our customers do. He can get by on it for another year. And, and they're like, you sound just like one of our customers. And I'm like, shit, yep, you're right. Let's go get that guy a new laptop. But it's like, but we also need to think about exactly how we're saying it to make sure that we get that customer buy-in. If you guys don't know Robert Gillette, you should. He is doing some really cool stuff over at the MSP Dojo. And one of the things he's getting ready to start is.
Come back.
We lost you.
Right at the crux of it all.
The best part. Alex, rewind. Sorry. There it goes.
We lost.
Well, all right. So airport mail. So, as always, right as we get to the pinnacle of the story and the
really was
of the book, it goes away. So, anyways, Kyle, you were going to chime in.
It's funny. We try to systematize everything, right? We always try to wrap a framework around it. And if there's one thing I've learned in my career is when it comes to people and communication, you need to be prepared for the inevitable. How do you prepare somebody for the inevitable? Because at some point, you're going to have to close the book instinctually, say, you know what? I'm throwing this entire agenda away. Here's what's important to talk about right here and now. And also, we can't be afraid of not having an answer. I think so often as technical people, we think we always get an answer right then and there. And that gets us in trouble. That's why handshake deals happen. That's why risk gets opened up. That's why clients end up getting pissed off at you because you overpromised and underdelivered, because you did not have the heart to look at the customer and say, that's a fantastic idea, or if that's great input, I'm going to have to get back to you.
Sometimes no or I don't know is always the best answer.
Yeah.
As long as it's followed by I'll get back to you. And I think I'm back to you. So what I was going to say is Robert is starting over at the dojo some account manager and VCIO type role plays to supplement the sales only role plays that he does today. So, if you're in one of those places where you're like, hey, I just don't feel like my delivery is perfect, practice. And practice on somebody who's not spending money with you. If you practice on the person that's not spending money with you, you get a no and you're done. You don't get to go back and do it over. You screw it up in a practice session somewhere and you get it's like a video game, right? You get to respawn and try again.
I think, well, I don't think, I know kind of what you're kind of talking about there at Empath, right? And kind of like what's important to me when I'm starting to build out compliance scorecard is like, I'm going to put dedicated paid time for staff to spend a minimum of X number of minutes or hours or days or whatever a week to education, right? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I hear, at least with, the MSPs that I work with, and it's like, I ain't got time for that. Well, you know what? I don't care. Like me holding you accountability, right, Kyle, is you're going to block off a half hour a day, an hour. You're going to block off a dedicated time on your calendar that says, I'm going to do this during this time frame on this period. And then I turn everything else off and go do that thing and force ourselves into doing that work, even if it's on ourselves, and making sure that for our technicians, for our salespeople, for all the people in our organization, I'll pay you an hour a week or whatever I decide to ensure that you are educating yourself, that you're going through some stuff to better yourself, right? Because the more you better yourself, the better we all get.
I think that's apropos to the discussion with the clients too, is blocking off time to train on your clients, educate yourself on their business, go look at their website, go see what they're selling, go see what their marketing says. That can all give you these ideas of how to talk to them about their business. And so I think that I just wanted to inject that before we move on.
Yeah, so, we don't do enough of that.
And we talked about that last week, just nuggets, right, that you can bring in, Jesse. Easy icebreakers. Go ahead, Wes. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say two things that come to my mind with this. One is everyone knows like the Google side project time. I think it was 20%. I think they even call it the 20% project, right? Yeah, like a whole day. And they were a bit now, sure, they sidelined and shelved all this brilliant innovation. That's a different story.
Right.
But it's amazing when you free people up and say, not only you encourage, we're actually asking and expecting you to go upskill and learn and pursue some other things. And I'll give you an example. You can be creative. Like I do agree with what Tim said. You should carve those times out consistently in your calendar. And we tell people that with Empath, if you want to be successful, it's about an hour a week is what we expect of you. If you don't do that, then you're going to come back with the answer of there's too many fires burning. And then you have to say, well, how are you going to put out the fires burning? They're not going to put themselves out. So how are you going to upskill and get better to where you can actually have less fires, right? So it's a chicken and egg thing. But the other thing you can do too, I'm going to point to Andrew Zaccoli over at Proto Technologies in Atlanta. I was talking to him at the MSP I deeply respect. And he was saying one of the things that he does in particular, and Proto does, is they actually carve an entire week out of their schedules once a year to go and upskill. And he said, I leveraged that last time to go get my CISSP because I'm just not going to be able to do it an hour a week. That's more for like the consistent things I can spread out a big concept over time. And I got to dive in. I got to get my brain on a track. And I can't, like, it's basically a vacation, but not a vacation. So we're out of work. We're not checking email. Someone else is my backup. And I'm diving deep into something for a week. I'm like, how brilliant is that? Sure. That's like 1/52nd of someone's work for the year. That's a lot, but how much more value does he and Proto get out of that? So I encourage people to get creative on these things and think about how can I take upskill up to another level, and what would that do for our MSP?
Awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing is brutal feedback, right? Tim and I, we watch each other's pitch at demos, and we're friends, so we're okay with that. And it's soliciting feedback and taking, tough feedback. Maybe I'll ask you guys after this, like, Tim, that was terrible. You're way out of line. I don't know, but you got to be able to, once you kind of have these, as Alex was talking about, some of these simulated conversations on yourself, like just having that feedback and getting that feedback makes you step change functions better, right?
Yeah.
Like immediately. So, but it's hard, right? I mean, ideally you would be okay with not being one of your best friends, like giving you the feedback. Like it would be someone else in the company, even the customer, right? Like even the client, like what can I be doing better? And
one of the things that I always tried to do during conversations with the customer is always leave the last 15 minutes on what went well, what didn't go well, what can I do better, what did you like? Those kinds of conversations, those kind of rapid fire questions on, hey, I made this whole big presentation. You gave me a seat at the table. How'd I do?
Yeah.
Right? How can I do it better next time? Or did I meet all your needs this time? Right? And being able to actually ask for that feedback, and don't be afraid for it. Like,
it's a brave question, right? You got to have thick skin, but it's super valuable.
Yeah.
Because everybody is afraid of that day when a customer says, "That was an hour of my life I can never get back. Can we please never do that again?"
I flat out
the value we deliver.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll make the quickest change, Alex. Right? Like, be like, damn.
I wish somebody had given me that feedback. I wish somebody had given me that feedback early on, right? If I had any idea how many times, and this came to my mind at one point when a customer kind of challenged me over wanting to have all of their leadership team in a meeting, and they went, "Well, that's a really expensive room for me." And they had sat and done the math, and they're like, "It cost me almost $800 an hour to pull all the people into a room that you want to have." And I went, "Oh shit, that's the level of value that I have to deliver."
Right.
And as IT folks, like, we belong, as security folks, we belong talking to the top levels of their company, like boards of directors and C-level executives who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. That adds up quickly. So if you think about it, as my personal rule is the $800 room, right? But if you think about that room cost $800 an hour for them to run, do they want to hear about their patch stats? Do they want to hear about how many spams you blocked?
Yes.
Like, no. Good job, buddy. Please go away. Can we never do that again? And so, there's a need to just figure out, and it's the same as email and text and like instant messaging. Like, when do you use which communication method? Well, what do you communicate in which methods to your customer? Could it have been an email? Could it have been just a phone call to your point of contact? Or did it require the entire board of directors and those kind of things? And are we taking the things that are important enough for the board and really bringing them in there and showing value, and taking the menial stuff just to our point of contact and going, "Hey, you can run this through your organization and take care of it for me," right? Thanks. Moving on. Right. You can help Mary take her security awareness training. We don't need to talk about that in front of the board of directors.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think it's a quote I often go back to, and Shakespeare said, or was accredited with saying, "Brevity is the soul of wit." And so I think you said it's an $800 room. Can I give $800 of value? And the skill is how quickly can I get them through that meeting? Because if you can get, and reporting to boards as a CISO, you learn this. If you can get them through 15 minutes and just give them exactly what they need to know to make a decision, you're doing real well. So thinking about how not to get so much face time, but to maximize the value of the face time when you're with those important decision makers is a real skill.
What's funny is yesterday, Jesse, I was talking with our boy Robert Chaffee, and we were talking about a video I posted yesterday on YouTube, and I said, "Yeah, we're a little long-winded," and he goes, "Oh, you're like Mark Twain." He said, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead."
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we got about 15 minutes left here. I know we talked a lot about education, about getting a seat at the table. I wonder if there are granted, I'll pull up my 14 questions and pick one out of there. But I wonder if each one of us could think about what is the question that we need to ask to even say, hey, can I sit in your board meeting? That's not the question we should be asking, right? How do we actually even start that conversation?
Why not with,
can I rewind here for a second?
Go ahead, Kyle.
And I would love this feedback, and I would love to see this data. How many MSP clients actually have boards?
I worked with a ton of nonprofits and municipalities. So I had boards of directors, and I worked with fire departments. Well, I guess they're technically nonprofits, but they have boards of directors, and the towns have town councils, and all of them need cybersecurity presentations. There's a lot of them. If you think about how many nonprofits exist in this world, it's a significant number. And that's a question we need to ask. But Tim, I'm going to push back on you and say, why wouldn't we just say, hey, I have some really important stuff that probably should be presented to the board. How about you let me do it instead of forcing you to go play a game of telephone and try and repeat all the nerd things that I'm going to say? And I'm going to go in and not say nerd things, but I'm going to use that as a crutch to convince my customer they don't want to be presenting that. They want to let me go have that conversation.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great way to present it.
If you offer to support them as opposed to throw them under the bus, it's a pretty good way to get there. My other magic trick is the budget, right? If we start talking budget forecasting, they almost have to put me in front of the board to justify my budget and to help them justify their budget.
Yeah, the budget conversation is always one that tends to open up doors, right? Especially when you can go into that and hey, this is some ways we think we found ways to save you money. Those kinds of conversations can open up the doors. Wes, I see you shaking your head, nodding over there. You got anything you might want to add?
I was just thinking, sometimes it's not the one question that you can ask. It's the pursuit of a series of questions. It's the pursuit of understanding that you may have years and years of debt to pay back with a client that you got to overcome. And it's the tenaciousness and humbleness to go approach that and go fix that conversation, right? If I've been having horrible verbal abuse with my wife for my entire marriage, and I say sorry once, it's not going to do anything. But if I can show some amount of actual care and repentance over months and months and years, I'm going to show that I'm actually changed, right? And I think a lot of it is the same way with a client. I just wanted to zoom into that for a minute. Is definitely pick questions and definitely get your favorites and dive into them, but also understand sometimes it to command the respect of a decision maker might just take some time from you. Yeah. And you might just say, I'm going to walk into this meeting and I know I've done this horribly in the past. So I'm just going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to ask how you make money. I'm going to diagram and I'm just going to do some of the stuff that we've talked about before and just walk out of it realizing the clouds are not going to open up and it's not going to happen right away. It's going to take some time, but those little incremental baby steps are eventually going to work to get a client to say, you know what, that was actually a positive outcome here. And I would like to consider that again.
I love that. Great point. I mean, like you said, most of the average relationship is very long. And as Wes said, it could have been years and years and years and years. You can't just change on one day. So go ahead, Alex.
Well, but I think it's okay also to say, I'm sorry. You can go into your customer and say, hey, we probably should have had this conversation a year ago or 2 years ago, or at some point in our past. And we were so busy fighting fires that we just didn't get to it. And that's on me. But I'd like to fix that going forward. And if you think about the credibility that just that statement builds up, to own it and say, we should have been doing this already. So let's go fix that. Let's go improve it. This is what better looks like going forward. But then the trick is you have to live up to it.
Right.
And you promise better and different. The world better be better and different. No different than that conversation you're having with your wife.
Do you think that MSPs are, I hate to use the word scared or generally afraid or like whatever fears about starting to have that conversation, even considering admitting to my client, hey, I should have been doing this all along, but now can we do this? Like, do you think they're afraid to even ask that question or approach that?
I think they are. I mean, right? I mean, it's all of a sudden, it's like when you want to change a security stack or offering, it's like, well, why are you changing it? Or we talked about this week, Tim, like vulnerability management. Why weren't you doing this the whole time? Like, well, so you're telling me I was at risk this whole time? Like, why are you changing? So I think it's a careful balance beam act, right? Going through there. So
being able to be humble enough to admit your failures and honest enough to want to fix them and put in the work to actually fix them. So yeah. So we're go ahead. Anybody else have any last parting words before we shift gears?
Last thing I want to on this measurement, like I was enamored with Kyle the first time I met him, just because he has all the KPIs for MSPs, like K7. He's just the master of KPIs and measurement, right? If you're not measuring it, you can't fix it. So maybe that helps get into that conversation, right? You're like, well, I'm measuring now, and I understand that I wasn't doing things right, and now these risks are exposed, and I want to go address them. Maybe that's one way you kind of talk about that years and years of doing the wrong thing. So, but that comes back up.
I would be careful though when you're talking to decision makers. That would be me probably not taking my own medicine. Measure differently. Measure yourself. Don't measure your customer, because they want to talk about their business. And if you're going to measure anything, measure somehow when you're going to get to their goal. So if they're saying we're growing by 20% next year, you need to ask them, well, if you're growing by 20%, how many people are you going to hire?
Yeah,
if you're going to grow by 20%, are you going to need to move to a new building? Right. And now there is critical education to know how to ask those questions. However, that's a me problem. That's not a customer problem.
But maybe you get to that whiteboard, right? Customer and I. Yeah. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
So shifting gears here, let's take the last 8 to 9 minutes here. Wes, you have something you want to share, right? For all us well-known rejects, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to talk about rejects? Don't we all feel like rejects here and there?
Yeah. You know how many times I've been rejected?
Right? Yeah.
After a bad SBR.
After a bad QBR, TBR, whatever BR, right? So
that's largely how this whole rejection con thing came about. So the story is this. I've done this. I've submitted talks to Black Hat, to RSA, to IT Nation, to local conferences. I know what it's like to get rejected. And you're like, wait a second, why did they reject that talk? I know that was going to be good. There's no question in my mind. It wasn't salesy. There's definitely great education. The reality is there's a lot of reasons to talk it's rejected. It could be something nefarious, like they just don't like you. But it also is more likely it just didn't apply well to the conference, or they misunderstood what you're trying to say, or you have no street cred, which is a shame. But the real issue is that's sad when that happens, and it shouldn't be that way, right? And so I've had a lot of folks reach out and like, we need something for everyone else. And, I think for those of us that have a platform and that do have the ability to be in front of a lot of other folks and have folks listen to you for whatever reason, I think the onus is on us to open that up to others and say, we would love to give you a platform too, and love to give you a place to speak, because we know that you have something that you should be sharing. And so we created this thing called Rejection Con because of that. And I'll just give you a little peek of it if anyone's interested. It's rejectioncon.com. So it's easy to get to. And here this is. Go check this out. What's really cool about Rejection Con, you can actually, there's somebody we know. We actually have voting open right now. The cool thing about Rejection Con is no one is rejected from Rejection Con. That's not a thing. Everyone's on it. Everyone's here. And what we're doing is we're giving a voice to the voiceless, right? And so you can actually click right here and vote now. We've got a ton of talks that are up. And again, no one's actually going to be rejected. If you don't get into this year's Rejection Con, we'll bring you up. So no one's rejected. But we do have a priority listing. And what's really cool about Rejection Con is you can click right here to register now. But the coolest thing about it, on top of these awesome robots, is everything that we're doing, all of the conference pass revenue goes to Rural Tech Fund. So you can go research that and find out more, but it's a 501c3. I personally vetted them. I know the CEO very well, Chris Sanders. And what's really cool about this is what we're doing with Rejection Con and what Rural Tech Fund is doing is they're reinvesting back into the community. And so we complain all the time. Oh, how do we find the talent? How do we find the people? How do we where do I hire from? Well, Rural Tech Fund is about that. They actually impact all 50 states, 150,000 plus students. And with us giving to this, I want us to give 25K. That's my goal. I want us to give 25K back. And as MSPs, we band together and vendors and we say, you know what? We're giving back. I saw Degley on the chat just a minute ago. Degley is already registered to be in, which Degley's awesome. I want to see you guys there. I want to see you get a pass in. It's a pay what you can model. So if you don't have any money, come on in. But I think most of you do. And I think most of you can afford to pay $50. And MSP owners, if you're listening today, I think you can afford $500 for an MSP pass to get everyone in your MSP in. So that's kind of what this thing is about. We're raising money for the good of the community. We're giving a voice to the voiceless. How do you go wrong with that?
How do you go wrong with that? Having been rejected, and as Tim, the other Tim can attest to, having been rejected from several, almost 100% RFP process, and in dealing with federal government's RFPs, right? But also in talks, right? So, I like to tell stories. I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at telling my stories. And I submit these talks and these stories, and I'm like, damn, I put so much work into the thought process and the storyline and the imagery only to be rejected. So you being able to give a voice to the voiceless, not just me, but so many others in the community that have such great things to say and share and bring a completely different perspective than the 6 of us here or the 12 of us or the 14 or the 20 of us that are kind of always front and center. I think that's really awesome. And Rural Tech Fund, who doesn't want to support an organization helping kids to get jobs in the space that we know and love, right? I think for the vast majority of us here, we fumbled our way into the space, or maybe we took some, but when we look at the upcoming, the people that will replace us in time, the next generation of IT leaders, right? Something like the Rural Tech Fund can really help to start get them going and really help to launch their career, which I think is great. $50, $100, $500, pony up, right? We're sponsoring it, and we'll, whatever. It's. I think it's worth it to the community. I think it's worth it to the organization.
Okay, I love that. I mean, I'm down with that, right? And I think that's what the MSP space should be about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so last 2 minutes here. We do our rapid fire. One key takeaway. We'll start with Alex since he's in the top over there. Hey, Alex, and take a second or 2, 3 minutes, whatever, and talk about one key takeaway.
I think what I'm going to bring back is the comment that that we were having in the chat over here on YouTube a little bit, and between Matthias and Degley. Relationships are a work in progress all the time. So don't think about them as broken or fixed. You're either building them up or tearing them down with every action that you make. And it's kind of like the old sales adage, right? You're either always selling or always being sold on why you're not the right solution. I don't like a pushy sales culture, but I do like somebody who's always looking to improve and build their relationships just a little bit better. A lot of that comes from a giver's mentality. So if you give your customer, if you feel like you're giving 90% of the time, you're probably giving 50% of the time. And, that helps keep things in perspective for you, but always be working to improve those relationships, because people listen to people that they have a relationship with, not people who they employ and instruct and demand things from.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Wes, your key takeaway for today?
Not empath, but eating, it's like an elephant. You eat it one bite at a time, right? So please don't leave when you hear these webinars, you hear the nerds like us pontificate on what to do. Just go start doing it and understand that you won't solve any major problem in one fell swoop. It's going to take a lot of work and effort, but it's just like eating an elephant. Please don't eat Emmy. She's too nice to be eaten. But go find another elephant and eat that one.
Awesome. Thanks, Wes. And Kyle?
If we're going to use the elephant metaphors, I'm just going to say an elephant never forgets.
Oh,
Your customer never forgets. Yes, you get 1 or 2 bats. Yes, they'll even give you a third at bat. But if you keep doing, as Alex likes to say, knock, knock, give me money, they're going to expect you to be doing knock, knock, give me money.
Yeah.
So you need to pay attention to the body language, the listening style, the businesses that your clients have. And if you have ran out of time to do that, then that is a problem of scale. You need to find someone else in your company to do it.
Just like we ran out of time with 19 seconds over the hour. So Tim, you're up. I'll go last. Jesse, you're right after Tim.
Yeah. So don't be complacent, right? Someone already left. But that healthy anxiety, I think, really addresses like Kyle and Alex's, having that healthy anxiety and always being curious. You'll put yourself in a good place to ask questions and actually try to read body language as opposed to, everything's all good.
Read body language. Jesse, you're up. Last time.
Yeah, I'll say. I'll say from my end, you got to operationalize this. We talked about, exactly like what Wes said. We've pontificated a bit here, but we've tried to give you some tips. Take some things that you thought about today. Say we're going to do this. Work with your team, build a program, build some feedback loops, and start doing some process around this. And I think you'll see that build in over a year's time. It'll be widely successful.
And I'll end with put a half hour on your calendar today, every day for the next month and a half, and use that time for yourself to do this work on yourself. Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Team Tim. We'll have a recorded session. We'll have a recorded session for Friday of Black Friday, and we'll see you all back live again in 2 weeks.
Subscribe now.